So the question I want to ask you to start things is, first of all, it's really cool to hear that you got invested in, or purchased VITA tokens. So can you tell us kind of why you did that? Why are you interested in decentralized funds? Yeah.
Well, so we were doing, we did this thing. We have a show called Blockchain Basement. I have like 9 shows. They're not all on my channel, but we run a lot of different things. And so I went down. I usually don't do this show. It's after my live stream at 11:30. So it starts at like 1:30. Went down there, and it just so happened that they were covering a tweet that showed where all these big investment funds were putting money into it. And so there were 2 up there. Every single one was an ERC20, which token built on Ethereum, which I thought was super interesting. And there was like 2 up there that I didn't know. And I was like, what is this VITA? Why is, I don't know, I can't remember if it was Andreessen Horowitz. It's one of the big funds that put money into it. And so it caught my eye. Well, the next morning, I was telling my channel about that we were going to this decentralized science conference. And so I started digging into decentralized science coins, because as you know, we've been covering these for since December, but it's been hard to go into the specifics of a lot of the projects because they're just not very well known. A lot of them, they're just popping up. And so I started digging into what a lot of the different ones were, with what they do, and what shows up right there at the top of the list of top DeSci coins was VITA now. There were a couple other ones I looked at. I looked at Molecule. I looked at I think Signet, I believe, and another one, Antidote, is cool. But here's why I invested in VITA now. This is what I really liked about it. I really liked about it that number 1, the investment funds were putting money in, and number 2, Pfizer gave y'all a big investment. And so I don't know how I feel about that. I would like to get, like to ask you about, because I would think like Pfizer tends to run against what decentralized science is about, right? They're like kind of the problem, but we know they got big money. So, like I almost, always said this, I've always said that, and we see this today, and you saw this with Sam Bankman-Fried, and you saw this with, what was going on with giving all the money to the candidates. I've always said for years and years and years that they can't destroy us from the outside. They can only destroy us from the inside. And so you look at a lot of these big investment funds, and it's easy ways to make money. I mean, if you look at Polygon, Goldman Sachs holds like an unbelievable amount of Polygon. So price go up, that's good. And so it had a lot of hype from what I saw, had a lot of good people connected to it that I saw. And those investment funds were putting in, and then when I saw that Pfizer, I was sold. But I want to hear from you, like what you're standing. Now it's Pfizer Ventures, right? So it's their capital arm. It's not that. But I'm so thrilled that I'm here today talking to you, because this has been a question that ever since I did the research, I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. I know it's going to make money, but just let me hear your thoughts on that.
So I think if you look at the pharmaceutical or the biotech space, there are like certain things where decentralization is created, and that's where DAOs prosper, right? We have this huge community of people that can scout the entire world, find the best science, bring them in, evaluate them, right? And the hive mind finds the best science in a way. But then if you want to bring a drug to market, there's, I think, a strong case to be made that decentralization still matters to some extent, right? I think what Craze is really good at is like this complex organization that it needs to take to manufacture and produce like large quantities of like drugs, molecules that are standardized, that always work, right? And I think that's probably something where decentralization currently is like not that great yet, right? So I think it's where I always look. I think we with VITA DAO, we're like in an area where the main goal is like to bring some research to a level that it can be funded like by also traditional companies, right? And in biotech, you have this valley of death. There's like a lot of promising research in academia, and they're missing 1 or 2 experiments to really make them ready to raise funds, right? And that's like the area that we cover, and I think that's where like decentralization is very good at, and that's where like the hive mind and the DAO can really provide value. And then from there we bring it like to the sphere of like more traditional pharmaceuticals, where they can do what they are best in. But for us, it's like really okay, especially like this area of life extending or like anti-aging medicines. That's like something that like now pharma is starting looking at. And I think it's always funny that like it's not only price that we got aboard now, the CSO of Novartis is sitting in our meetings now, right? So it's funny, like a lot of like the traditional academic, aging academics, they try to bring those big pharmaceuticals in, and what it takes is actually like a DAO of like revolutionary thinkers in a way that do things differently to get those guys excited.
Yeah.
I think what's also awesome is that, like, you know, you talk about the value of depth for research, but I mean, DeSci could have a value of depth of its own. Like, we've seen other crypto projects and verticals spiral down, and companies like Pfizer and Novartis can bring a lot of capital to the table and take these ideas that the space has developed and really give them rocket fuel, right? And take those ideas, I think, to the finish line.
But are there, I don't know, there's a lot of science people. Now, I did life science in the 9th grade, I did chemistry and sensor. I'm a science guy myself. I'm made of molecules. But like everybody pretty much universally thinks Pfizer's evil, right? Like in the science community, they're not like that. Do people like not think that Pfizer is evil? I think the general person out there feels like very uneasy about that.
Well,
And I understand your point. I'm just, maybe I'm misinformed or you know, it seems like to me it just kind of scares me a little bit about, you know, coming in, because nobody thinks Pfizer wants transparency, right? They went to India and they wanted to, they were going to take over like 1.8 billion people in healthcare. And India was like, hey, yeah, before we do that, can we just see some of your testing and some of your results? And they're like, application withdrew, you know?
Yeah, I'm gonna take this question from like a slightly oblique angle, but I'll bring it back to this
Okay.
point where I think the most important thing when we move forward with decentralized science is how you set up the infrastructure to guarantee that things are going to happen in the way that you want, right? So as an example, when we're talking about something as important as aging research, right? There's like no better societal good if we can get tons of money to go into that, right? But if you're concerned that that money will then steer the ship in a way that we don't like, or things like that. But if you properly set up your DAO governance and things like this, you can protect against that. And one thing that I think is a commonality between decentralized science and blockchain technology and life extension research is that these are kind of new modalities. The existing structures are a little bit calcified. They don't really know how to deal with it yet. But I think we can present a model by like doing a decentralized clinical trial for Alzheimer's disease that actually works or something like that, where you can catalyze the existing systems to transform into a better model because they can see that it's acceptable.
I mean, that's what we all want,
Yeah.
right? I mean, so we're trying to do with our government, what we're trying to do with our money, what we're trying to do with science. Like, science is so interesting that this is an area now that this is happening in, because it's, you know, there's a lot of issues, and that's why I'm extremely. I know we were talking before. I think when AI is going to have another big run in this bull run, and when it happens, I think a lot of the DeSci stuff, it's also kind of working with a lot of AI stuff. I think that's when it'll start to move probably pretty good.
So now that you have beta tokens, did you already look into governance, into voting?
Well,
We had beta tokens.
No, I still have some. I still have some at work. So almost not all of my crypto accounts have $28 in them. Cassie had to send me $20 or $25 in case I needed a gas fee. Basically, like all of our crypto is corporate, right? So I asked my CFO to buy some 2 days ago, and so now that I know there's governance and stuff like that and how it works, we'll start voting. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. If we can't participate, what's the point, you know?
Now, do you have any other questions sort of about just sort of decentralized science as a mission or what's actually going on or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that, I'm trying to remember what's the other big question. So we were talking about this on my show the other day. We were talking about, you know, people hate nonprofits. Some people love some nonprofits. But when you look at like the larger nonprofits, like let's say the American Cancer Society, Planned Parenthood. When you look at the American Cancer Society, I think this is a really good example. They're in 2020, their top 4 employees, right? Their CTO, their CEO, their CMO, whoever it was. Between the 4 of them, they made $2.5 million. Now, I want to be very clear. I don't have a problem with those people making that much money. If they're running that kind of organization and it's that high level and a lot of money is flowing through, like people don't go become the CEO of a nonprofit because they want to be poor. You know, like certainly smaller nonprofits, like your local church or something, like people aren't going to be getting rich there. But you know, you want people who are ambitious, run the best kinds of places, and they want to move up. And I have no problem with that, but a lot of people do. But here's the issue: when we look at a lot of these nonprofits, imagine if that $2.5 million could be sent directly to the people doing the research. And then I think, like, I don't know, cancer is a business, like abortion is a business. Like these are businesses. And so because of that, you look across the board and you just understand that kind of lowers their motivation to find the cure. I mean, that's what a lot of people believe, is that who knows what could be out there. But the question is, could decentralized science actually bring the death of a lot of these large nonprofits? And when you think about it, it's it's very interesting because all the money flows, and now the research is able to be done in a lot more unbiased way, I believe.
Yeah, so I think it's a fair point to be concerned about like waste and misappropriation of resources, right? But I think you're going to anticipate the answer here. This is one of the things that blockchain technology can obviously help with in general. If you could, in the future version, 5 years from now, you can go, I want to donate some of my money, and I can just see all the nonprofits and their tracked expenditures, and that the money is going to what I actually think it's going, and it's verifiable on chain, etc. That can just sort of create a better model of philanthropy. So I would say, again, I don't know what are the best or worst charities in regards here, but I think this whole idea.
I wouldn't call names to one out. I'm interested.
Yeah, but my point is that this is part of what decentralized science is trying to do, is to actually align the incentives. And I think that personally, big companies are, even if we have a successful anti-aging therapy, for example, that could cure cancer and other diseases, it's very likely that these therapies aren't going to be one and done. They're going to be things you have to do throughout your life. So my point is that I think these big companies are going to figure out how to make money anyway.
Yeah.
So in the other modalities. So I don't know, Max, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an 8 billion people market, right? Probably it's getting larger, right? Like he said that.
Probably getting larger.
Exactly right. And I mean, while those therapies might be more pricey at the beginning, if those therapies become rather affordable, right? It's like still the biggest market in the world.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to grow old and get diseased and sick and morbid, right? Maybe with that regard, how long would you like to live if you would be like healthy for a long time? What's like a number?
Like 150.
Okay.
Would that be pretty good? 150 by 150, you got to be like, all right, I'm out.
Let me get you to think about that. So if you're 149 years old right now, in this body exactly the same, and then Max asked you that question, would the number still be 150 if you're a healthy?
I love the statement. I can't remember where. I think I heard it from, maybe it was David Sinclair said it. It was that, you have people who commit suicide, obviously they're depressed, they have issues, whatever it may be, very sad. But in general, no healthy person wants to die, right? That was the phrase that he said. And I was like, golly, that's right. You get to 80, 90 and, people are just like, ugh. And that's why when somebody dies that that isn't in that bracket, it's really sad. Because you're like, oh, they're so healthy. It seemed like, you hear the stories about, healthy people dropping dead while they're jogging and stuff, that stuff. But I guess the answer is infinity. I don't know. See their view of the vampire. They get real sad after a few hundred years.
You guys see Record of Ragnarok? Every 1,000 years, you basically do an audit and say, I think we're done now.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So obviously in the field of longevity, people are worried about, scaring the public and saying immortality, et cetera, et cetera. But in general, I think the idea is that if most people are honest with themselves and they really think, okay, if I'm totally healthy, if my loved ones and my friends are around, the answer is sort of, I would prefer to defer that decision to my future self. Well, as long as I'm loving life, I want to have the option to continue loving life.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Well, I think where I got that age from is you think like 120 is like the maximum people live, right? Like, and there it's 0.0000001%, something like that. 117, 18, 19, that's very old, You think with this stuff, and they're very sick by then for the most part. You don't see 120-year-old people getting around, I mean, I saw the one lady was like the oldest lady in the world. She still lived by herself in her house, so she was doing pretty good. But I mean, so you'd think maybe 30 years beyond that, and being healthy that whole time, that would be pretty phenomenal. You
Yeah,
know?
I want to build off that in 2 quick points. Based on what you were just saying, there's been actually polling data that kind of shows this. If you ask 20-year-olds, do you want to be 100 years old? Maybe it's 50-50, but if you ask healthy 89-year-olds, it's 100%, right? So I think it's very important, and something that you said I think is very critical, because it was part of what you said. It's the notion of how health span relates to lifespan.
Yeah.
I think very few people want to live 200 years old if that means they're going to be decrepit.
Oh,
and
no.
crippled. But the good news is the only way that you're really going to actually live longer, if that's what you care about, is if your period of good health is extended.
Yeah.
So I think that was built into kind of what you said there.
Yeah, I mean, you want to feel good, and like, you know, I don't know, getting older is like pretty crazy. I'm probably not the oldest person in the room. I don't know if part of it is, but
A little grays in the beard.
I'm 40. I'm Ben. I'm 40. I'll be 41 this year. It's very sad. But no, it's good now because we're getting another year older, I guess. But it's like you look at your age, and for the most part, you know, do you know how many millionaires there are in the United States? It's crazy. Anybody have any idea? Anybody want to take a number? How many millionaires live in the United States? Michael, don't look it up. Don't. I know you're a researcher. Don't go in your little group and ask them folks. Do anybody have any guesses?
Now 3 million.
3 million.
1 in 20?
100,000.
We're all over the place.
Millionaires?
Yeah.
Single digit millions.
See, yeah, $1 million and up.
In the
You
U.S.
said 300,000?
No, that's not enough.
No, it's more than that.
What? Way more than that. What's that? 17 million. Maybe 18 million. 17 to 18 million millionaire. And you look at that and you're like, what the frick? Like 1 out of 20 people I see is a millionaire? You know that's not true. I feel like I'm the only one I know. And so, sorry. That was a humble brag, guys. That was a humble brag. But the point is that when you look at that number, it sounds great. Now in the rest of the world, I think there's only like 20-something million. Like we have almost all the millionaires in the United States, and then of course in the Middle East they kind of hide their money too. But the point is there's so many people. It's because real estate is what it is. It's because as you get older, they're all old people. All the old people have over $1 million if they're not living in a nursing home, you know, because then they trade their money. But it's because like as you get older, you get more successful, and you accumulate stuff, and then you know, like I just hit the prime of my life. I didn't even start my YouTube channel until I was 35, you know? And before that, I had some success in some different things, but I was struggling. And now things are great. And I'm getting older and I'm like, oh, I want to keep this going. You know, I know I'm only 40. I mean, it's not that old compared to, you know, some are 120-year-old granny, you know, but, you know, you just want to live longer when you're kind of at the top, you know? And that's what's so interesting about all this. And then the people that are kind of at the top, they can probably afford a lot of this stuff too.
Well, one last thing I want to say, and I think we're getting close to wrapping up based on what you just said. I'm not sure if you know this, Ben, but ever since back to the birth of cryptocurrency, you know, how people like Hal Finney, you know, maybe Satoshi Nakamoto, etc., many major cryptocurrency pioneers have been in favor of life extension and have been supporting our community in one way or the other. I would like to think that there's the confluence there is this idea of using technology to positively transcend boundaries, be it financial limitations or biological limitations. So I hope that you being here, you know, maybe you'll be able to share this more with your community.
Yeah.
Maybe you can work with charities like Lifespan.io or organizations
Yeah.
like Me the BitSquad. Because to your point, I think it's going to become super obvious to society soon that if you really want to have a positive outcome, you know, you want to treat the roots of the problem so that you can solve a lot of, you know, Alzheimer's, heart disease, cancer, etc. At the same time, or decentralization to help with the issue of maybe too much wealth concentration or, you know, spreading things out, helping everybody. So
And I tell you what, AI is going to play a critical role in this. Like they're talking about like AI is going to be what cures cancer. That's what they're saying. Hopefully they're going to give us that gift before the robots kill us all.
that's another conversation. But anyway,
It is.
thank you everybody. If you have any questions for any of us, you can hit us up. Ben, you're going to be here throughout the day?
For a little bit.
Okay.
We'll go down and check out that.
Swarm, Ben. If you have any questions for him. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.